Georgia is coming off of a bye week. So, what are we hoping to see heading into, if not the biggest game of the year, certainly the biggest rivalry game of the year? It's Florida week. Let's talk about what we're hoping to see from this Georgia team as they hit the practice field, getting ready for the Gators next on the Locked On Bulldogs podcast.
You are Locked On Bulldogs, your daily podcast on the Georgia Bulldogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Bulldogs podcast, everybody. I am Daniel. Clint is got the night off tonight. Here talking about the Georgia Bulldogs, as always, on the Locked On Bulldogs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by who is today's episode brought to you by? FanDuel. Obviously, today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more at FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the Locked On Bulldogs podcast. We love them and talk about them a lot. More on them in a moment. Thanks so much for being here. Thanks for making us your first listen, not only your first listen of the day, but since it's a Monday, your first listen of the entire week. It's a big week if you're a Georgia football fan. Thanks for being an everydayer and for being with us every day. We will be here every single day breaking down this team. As always, we love you guys. You guys are the absolute best. You got us over 10,000 subscribers on YouTube. Make sure if you're subscribed to the YouTube channel that you go subscribe to or follow us on whatever audio podcast platform is your preference, whether that's Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you get your podcast. Go ahead and subscribe to the Locked On Bulldogs podcast there. All right, let's jump in to the content for today. As I mentioned in the open, we're coming off of a bye week, a chance to catch our breath. It's been an up and down season for Georgia, to say the least. Georgia fans have felt a lot of feelings throughout this season, some of them overwhelmingly positive, some of them overwhelmingly negative. Most of the time, we've been feeling both of those feelings at the exact same time. And so now Georgia goes into a bye week, probably on our highest high of the season, certainly coming off of an absolute beatdown of the Texas Longhorns in Austin in front of Matthew McConaughey and everybody. Georgia goes into the bye week, the second bye week of the year, the way the schedule breaks out. Every team gets 2 bye weeks this year. Georgia in its second bye week, a second and final bye week of the year, and now we go down the home stretch of this season. Believe it or not, we are here. We are here at the end, in the absolute final stretch of the season. It is Florida this week, the world's largest outdoor cocktail party in Jacksonville, as always, this weekend. We follow that up with a trip to Oxford, Mississippi, an Ole Miss team that barely squeaked past Oklahoma this last week. We follow that up with a trip back to coming back to Athens and welcoming in the Tennessee Volunteers. We know that if it's even drizzling, Tennessee probably will not show up. They'll probably forfeit the game because they're unable to play in the rain. But if it's not raining, it should be a good matchup. And then kind of the de facto bye week with the nobody scheduled, and then Georgia Tech to end it out on Thanksgiving before hopefully the SEC championship game and the college football playoff. So we're in the home stretch. We're going to have Georgia football every single week. The bye week came at a great time for Georgia. One, because vibes are up. And so as a fan, it's nice to go into a bye week without absolute consternation. Think about if you're an LSU fan right now. You're going into your bye week before you play Alabama in 2 weeks after getting shellacked in College Station by the Aggies. And so it's good. It's a good time to be a Georgia fan. Also, it helps Georgia get even healthier, which brings me to my first point. Things I want to see coming out of this bye week as we get into practice in earnest for Florida is health on the offensive line. We saw Jared Wilson inserted in the Texas game. He was able to get back in there. Drew Bobo did an admirable job of holding down the fort at center, but good to have Wilson back. I think Georgia needs him in the middle of that offensive line. I think they need his presence, his physicality. He is the guy in the center of that offensive line. And then next to him, Will this be the week that we see Tate Ratledge return? He was listed as questionable last week. Kirby said he could have been used in an emergency situation, probably as like a third center or something like that is the only situation that they would have used him if both Wilson and Bobo were to go down with injury in the same game. You know, Tate's kind of the only guy left on the roster that can snap the football, and so they might have used him in that type of situation. But if he was healthy enough to travel and be in an emergency situation, and then we got an entire bye week, and now an entire week of practice leading up to this Florida game, will this be the week that Tate Ratledge is back in the starting lineup? Will he be inserted straight back into the starting lineup? Dylan Fairchild, Micah Morris, been holding things down, been playing, I think, fairly well, but I think all of Georgia football recognizes that Tate Ratledge is a special talent. I think we want to see him in the game. I think it's going to help Georgia in many facets of the game along the offensive line. And Georgia needs this offensive line to continue to gel and come together and reach their full potential if Georgia is going to be the team that we all hope that they're going to be down the stretch. We've seen really good, for the most part, pass protection. Great pockets. Carson Beck has had time. We've seen really good pass protection, with the exception primarily of that Alabama game. Lot of trouble in the backfield in that game. Ernest Green looked like he forgot how to pass protect entirely. That game is an anomaly, and the longer we get into this college football season, the less and less I'm going to understand that game. It was an absolute, I can't believe we lost to that Alabama team, but I can't get into it right now. Georgia needs this offensive line to play to their full potential if we're going to be the team that we hope to be coming down the stretch of the regular season. We need it not only in pass protection, but we need it in terms of opening up holes in the run game. And I think that is where you are going to see a healthy Tate Ratledge really make an impact on this Georgia team in the ability to open up holes in the run game, to move bodies at the line of scrimmage, third and short, fourth and short situations, opening up first down runs. Georgia needs to be able to do that. You need to be able to run the ball when you need to run the ball, to close out these games, to win close games, to hold leads, to do all the things. Not to reference back to the LSU Texas A&M game, but you had one team in that game that rushed for 242 yards, and you had one team in that game that rushed for 24 yards. Guess which team won the football game? Now, A&M hardly passed for any yard. They passed for like 100 and something yards in that game. Meanwhile, LSU passed for like almost 400 yards of passing. But that doesn't matter, because when you get outrushed 242 to 24, it doesn't matter how many yards you throw the football for. You've got to be able to run the ball in order to win these games. Now, Georgia isn't LSU. They can run the football, but I think all Georgia fans would like to see the offensive line continue to grow. I think Tate Ratledge provides a big lift to that, pending he is healthy. If he's not 100%, if he's not able to go full Tate Ratledge, I'll be honest with you, I don't want to upset the continuity of this offensive line that we have right now. I like the way that we're holding up in pass pro. I think Micah Morris and Dylan Fairchild are doing an admirable job. And so if Tate's not 100%, I don't want to see him forced back into action until he is 100%. I'd rather wait 2, 3, 4 weeks from now, if we have to, till he's 100% before I put him back in there prematurely, and all of a sudden maybe, there's blow-ups and there's holes and there's all of a sudden lacks, significant gaps in the offensive line. All right, we'll be back. I've got more things I want to talk about. I want to talk about this defense. I want to talk about the play calling. Mike Bobo is going to come up on the show today, so in case that does it for you, get excited about that. But first, these. And these are FanDuel, FanDuel.com. Make every moment more with FanDuel. You know that we love FanDuel. And right now, the NFL action is furious on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. That's right. You bet $5 now and you get $150 in bonus bets if you win. FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place all your live bets on the NFL, college football, the NBA season's in full swing, NHL, if that's your thing. Major League Baseball World Series is happening. It is the perfect time to get on FanDuel right now. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can go check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same place where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, let's talk about this defense. Man, did we need that against Texas? Not just from this year, like all of last year, the carryover of watching this Georgia defense. And I know last year, Georgia finished competitive in terms of overall ranking of total defense. But we watched it, and it just wasn't the same product on the field. This year, Georgia defense certainly had its ups and downs. Looked great against Clemson in week 1. A Clemson team, by the way, that is absolutely putting it on people week after week after week. Cade Klubnik looks like a Heisman Trophy caliber quarterback. He is like the new Bo Nix. He plays great against everyone except Georgia, in which he is absolutely terrible. But that's good news for the Georgia defense. They look great in a game like that. They look good in the Kentucky game, although Kentucky's offense is absolutely abysmal, so you don't really put too much stock in that. Meanwhile, first half of the Alabama game, I mean, the wheels completely fall off this Georgia defense. Like I'm talking about, like, we can't set an edge. We can't contain. We don't look like we know what we're doing at all. Kirby Smart basically said as much after the game. We didn't know what we were doing at all. They completely outcoached us, out-schemed us, out-prepared us, getting ready for the first half of that game. Georgia defense comes back in the second half. They look much better. One crazy play to Ryan Williams, who I don't know if you know this, is 17 years old, down the sideline. That's the only reason that Georgia's defense, that's the only play they gave up in the second half of that game. But then you come back against Mississippi State, and you're giving up points on top of points on top of points. And I know, like, Kirby tried to downplay that. He tried to minimize that. And there's probably some truth to that. It's a play here. It's a play there. There's a penalty here. There's a penalty there. A stupid face mask, a pass interference, yeah. I think generally speaking, you're right. I also saw a wheel route to the tight end work 5 different times on 3rd or 4th and short in that game. I saw wide open receivers streaking down the field. We saw lapses in the secondary from virtually every player in the secondary. Like, none of them had a good game in that Mississippi State game. And then you follow it up with that performance against Texas, in which the defense was absolutely stone cold, locked in, and dominant. I mean, just an absolute vintage Georgia defensive performance. We're not in the second half of the season, right? We're in like the final third of the season. But coming out of this bye week, I need a shutdown inning from this defense. You know what I mean? It's World Series time. Like, in baseball, when your team goes out and scores some runs, it seems like more importantly than ever, you need your starting pitcher to come out, or whoever it is, your pitcher to come out the bottom half of that inning, and you need a shutdown inning. You need to pitch you need to put a 0 on the board. You can't let them score right back. You can't let them bounce right back. All right? It's not a perfect analogy, but I feel like Georgia's defense went out and scored some runs last game. Like, they showed us something that's like, all right, this finally feels real, right? The pressure from Jalen Walker, right? Michael Williams seeming like he's getting closer to 100%. Now, coming off a bye week, surely he's much closer to 100%. Saw some things out of the secondary. Dalen Everett looked better. Looked like the safeties knew what they were doing. KJ Bolden continues to grow. The linebackers continue to play really well. We're seeing guys like Chris Cole get involved with a Smile Mondin injury, and he's looking like he's getting more and more comfortable. This defense looks like they went out there against Texas, and they showed us something that looks like it's legitimate, right? Like they scored some runs. Now we need them to come back against Florida, particularly this game. And we need them to put another zero. We need them to put a zero on the board. Not literally. We don't need them to shut Florida out. But if Georgia's defense can follow up that performance with another really good performance, it's going to go a long way towards helping me, who has been a noted Georgia defensive doubter over the last few years, right? And sometimes I've been right about that. But I've been a doubter of this Georgia defense over the last couple of years. It's going to go a long way towards convincing me down the stretch against Ole Miss, against Tennessee, against Texas A&M in the SEC championship game. I don't know who we're going to play. Texas again in the SEC championship game. And then in the college football playoff, it's going to go a long way towards convincing me that this defense is for real, that they have what it takes, that they are a legitimate force to be reckoned with. I like what I see. I think this Georgia defense is as healthy as they have been all year. I will be curious to see Ellis Robinson and how much, if at all, he contributes to this defense coming down the stretch for Georgia. Dalen Everett, Julian Humphrey, and Daniel Harris all appear to be firmly entrenched ahead of him. Does a bye week give Ellis Robinson a chance to find his way in there and get more playing time? Same with KJ Bolden. We know he's going to get playing time. He's been getting playing time all year. But are we going to see his role continue to grow? I like where this Georgia defense is at. I like the continuity and the chemistry of the players that we have on the field. I legitimately think Michael Williams, who has been injured the vast majority of the season, it feels like, I legitimately think he is more of a difference maker than we ever gave him credit for. And so if he's back and he's healthy and he's 100%, I think that makes a huge difference for this Georgia defense. And so what are we going to see out of this group? Can they put another good performance together against, to be honest with you, and we'll talk about it as we get later in the week, against a Florida offense that is kind of figuring things out? DJ Lagway, this is crazy, is a lot better than Graham Mertz. It's almost like if you had a real head coach, you would have recognized that a long time ago. But they're figuring things out on the offensive side of the ball at Florida, enough so that they're going to keep Billy Napier as their head coach, which, by the way, kudos to you, Florida, for making that decision, because I love it. I couldn't agree with that decision more. Can this Georgia defense come out and pitch a shutout, have a shutdown inning, be able to bounce back with another great performance and validate some of the things that they did against Texas? All right, let's flip over to the offensive side of the ball. Talk a little bit about play calling. Which Mike Bobo are we going to see down the stretch of the season? I can't imagine that any of you will feel any feelings about this next. But first, let's talk about game time. Listen, we love game time here on the Locked On Bulldogs podcast. GameTime.co. It is the place that we go to get all of our tickets to not only sporting events, but concerts, comedy shows, everything we want. Game Time has it. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks, making it easier to get tickets to see your favorite teams play live, even faster, even easier. They have long since been the place to go to get last-minute ticket deals. They're the place you go if you want the view right from your seat. If you want all-in pricing, you toggle on that all-in pricing section, and all of a sudden you see 100% of the price, the lowest price guaranteed, or Game Time is going to credit you 110% of the difference. Game Time ticket coverage, your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industries. Like I said, views from your seats, all-in pricing, priority Game Time picks. Game Time has it all. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time picks. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege. That's LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. All right, let's talk about Mike Bobo and this Georgia offense. Mike Bobo was trash in the Texas game. I hated most of the play calling decisions. If I see this Georgia team come out and empty in the first half against Florida, I'm going to lose my mind. Any 5-wide set, any empty set, any set that eliminates the threat of a play action pass, eliminates the threat of a run, I'm going to absolutely lose my mind. I cannot fathom why we went to it so much against Texas when the run game was really largely effective, especially with Trevor Etienne against the Longhorns. And so are we going to see, coming out of the bye week, maybe with the insertion of Tate Ratledge back into the starting lineup, are we going, maybe with Carson Beck struggling at times, looking a little bit overwhelmed at times, playing great at times, leading Georgia to victories at times, are we going to see a renewed commitment to the run game? Are we going to see Georgia commit to balancing out the offense? Georgia's offense is not balanced right now. It is very pass heavy. Like I said, it is not LSU. LSU cannot run the football, chooses to not run the football to an extreme degree. Georgia's not that, but we all know as Georgia fans, you have got to be able to run the football if you want to compete for national championships and SEC championships. If that's what this Georgia team wants to do, they are going to have to be able to run the football. They're going to have to be able to balance out this offense. They're going to have to be able to lean on Trevor Etienne and this run game. Now, I think the injuries to the backs have not helped. I assume that was what factored heavily into the game plan to throw early and often, like a lot in that first half, is that they didn't want to wear Trevor Etienne down and potentially use him more in the second half. But it just not wanting to have to get into Nate Frazier. This Georgia staff clearly does not want to have to rely on Nate Frazier. And look, I get it. He had an explosive game early in the season, but Nate Frazier has looked largely really pedestrian lately. Like he hasn't been great. The Branson injury hurts. Roderick Robinson continued to be out, hurts. But this Georgia offense has got to be able to utilize Trevor Etienne, and I would love to see him get more and more carries coming down the stretch. I would love to see him stretched out a little bit more than this Georgia staff typically does, just because we are so thin with quality depth at the running back position. Georgia's got to be able to get back to running the football for two reasons. One, because it's an effective way to move the ball. Two, because our best player on offense, as I mentioned last week, is Trevor Etienne. And so getting him the football early and often is probably a good thing to do. Did I say two reasons? Because three, I think running the football is the best way to help Carson Beck look more like Carson Beck this year, guess what Carson Beck does really well? Just look at the history of his stats. He runs play action really, really well, like exceptionally, really well. He excels in a play action pass situation. Well, when you're running 5 wides every trip, every snap, Mike Bobo, you can't really utilize the play action passing game because that ain't Mike Vick back there. Like, he's not going to fake the run himself and then throw the football. So I think the running game is the best thing for Carson Beck. Now, Carson Beck hasn't been bad this year, but he certainly hasn't looked like what Georgia fans hoped for that they would see out of him this year. I think everybody would say that. I think Carson Beck would say that. I think the running game is the absolute best thing for him. So if we can get back to running the football, if we can lean on the offensive line, we'll be able to not only put away games when we're ahead, we'll be able to not only stretch the lead on teams, control the clock, keep our defense fresh, but we'll also be able to make the passing game a lot better. Free up receivers who are good, but not great so far during this season. We'll be able to get them much more advantageous one-on-one matchups if we're able to utilize the run game, pull some safeties into the box. And so, no, I do not want to see Georgia come out and just 3 yards in a cloud of dust. I don't want to see us come out run on the very first series of the game. I do think the strength of this team, as scary as Carson Beck has made it this year at times, I do think the strength of this team is still Carson Beck dropping back in the shotgun and scanning the field in a 4-wide set, maybe a 5-person pattern with a running back leaving the backfield and going out into the pattern. But starting in the backfield, I do think that is still Georgia's best offense this year. But you've got to be able to complement that offense, accentuate that offense with the running game in order to make it Georgia's best offense this year. That's what I want to see Georgia get back to. That's what I'm hoping. That's the Mike Bobo I'm hoping that we get moving forward into this schedule. All right. As I said, we will be here all week, Clint and I, talking about this Georgia football team. Listen, it's the cocktail party. If you don't hate Florida this week, if you haven't hated Florida with the fire of 1,000 suns this week, then you are doing your life wrong. Do not let the fact that this program is absolute trash, that they're a dumpster fire, that Dan Mullen is the best coach they've had in over a decade. Don't let any of that make you forget that they're Florida and they deserve every loss that they get. They deserve every bad thing that happens to their program. And Tom Petty's incredibly overrated. Those are the things you need to remember heading into this game, heading into this week. And we will be back talking about it all week long on the Locked On Bulldogs podcast. And we will see you guys next time.